welcome back to the Rangers News YouTube channel. My name is James Black and I'm joined by Jordan Carlisle as we pick the bones out of this afternoon's 1-1 draw with Hamilton Accies. Now, it's a very disappointing afternoon, I think, for Rangers. It was a poor performance and a poor pitch and poor conditions with very, very few of Steven Gerrard's side actually coming close to getting pass marks over 90 minutes. It took the best part of 75 minutes for Rangers to actually get in the lead through a Brian Easton own goal after 77 minutes. And after that, it kind of looked as though Rangers were going to see the game out. And then, literally the last kick of the ball, Ross Callaghan slid the ball under Alan McGregor to snatch Hamilton's first point at home against Rangers since 1954, which it just kind of shows you kind of how unexpected a result that was. It's only the fourth time Rangers have dropped points this season in the league, though. So, Jordan, just kind of give us your initial thoughts on the game and kind of any standout performances or whatnot that's over 90 minutes.
It was very lacklustre, wasn't it? Just from the start. I thought it was very just laboured and slow, and I think obviously there wasn't enough in the final third in terms of attacks, but I thought there was some glimpses early on. I thought Itten did a couple of nice things, Hadji did a few nice things, as did, and Kent was lively during the game, but again, it's just a total lack of end product in his case. But I just thought there was absolutely nowhere near enough quality in terms of support from midfield. I thought Tavernier, I think the guy's absolutely brilliant, but I thought he had an absolute hard day in terms of nothing really came off from going forward. His crossing was poor. There was that double chance that he sort of missed out in the tackle, didn't go into it firmly enough. I think he was caught up the pitch again for that equaliser, which is inexplicable because we've had that before. Talk about Gerrard saying in the European games and stuff like that, people flying up the pitch, it's unnecessary at the end, and obviously it's the way Rangers play, but there's absolutely no need for that in the 94th minute at Hamilton, because it means that then Davis is trying to track the runner down the wing in the lead up to the goal. So I thought McGregor obviously was brilliant, and probably surprising for him as well. He was absolutely fuming in his interview with Sky after the game. But it would have been a surprise for him today of all the days for him to be busy. He probably wouldn't have picked this one out. So I thought he was good. I thought Barisic lacked a bit of quality with his deliveries in the first half, but was sort of great ball in for the own goal, and then had several more good balls in, which probably should have been finished, and it should have been 2-0. So I thought he was decent, and the subs, Jack and Davis, both made an impact, predictably.
So there was 3 changes to the starting 11 from the midweek win over St Johnstone, where Bongani Zungu, Cedric Itten and Glenn Kamara coming into the starting 11. When we kind of called 2 of those 3 changes, were you surprised to see Zungu get a start?
Very surprised, yeah. I sort of thought that it was a bit of a strange one because obviously the club worked hard to get him in. But he hasn't, the fact that he hadn't started a game until this point, and then the Offerbor signing and, talk of new deals for Davis and all that, it just seemed pretty clear that he's not going to be getting his permanent deal. Maybe this is a way to that was a way to give him an opportunity and say, look, obviously it looks here like we're planning to go another way, but change my mind and give me a great performance, which he did manage to do. I think he's clearly a very neat and tidy footballer on the ball, with the exception of there was a couple of lapses when he gave the ball away today. But I mean, I just haven't seen him play at any other pace than that way. He just takes the ball, receives it, moves it on. I think he showed a decent range of passing on his debut against Hamilton, and I thought he was impressive in the deep line role when he needed to do more defensive work against Lech Poznan away, but he just does everything at the same pace. He didn't manage to split the defence with any passes, didn't liven things up. And Kamara, I think, obviously, I think Zungu's getting a lot of stick for the performance, and he wasn't great, but I don't think Kamara was either. He was nowhere near what he's normally like, and yeah, it was just very disappointing from the midfield. It's one thing that it's obviously required that Jared needs to rotate the squad, and Kamara dropped out in the last game. That was the first time he'd been out of the starting 11 since November, I think. Mm-hmm. But it tends to be a thing. I think it's definitely the case with Davis. It didn't really show today when he came on, but since he's come back to Rangers, as soon as you take him out of the team and bring him back in, he loses that momentum. It looked to me that Kamara had lost momentum today, and he kind of strolled through it, but not in a good way. And then I think obviously everyone's been calling for him to get in. So we've been saying that surely this guy deserves a start, although we did sort of say that against St Mirren when it was a big game and he played through the middle, he struggled, and he did a bit today. I think he still holds the ball up nicely. Had a couple of nice ones where he took one and turned, swiveled and give it in behind to Kent, and a few nice things, but he just didn't impose himself enough in the game. So he didn't get much service, but he didn't grab his opportunity either.
This was, I think, the third game in the spin where Rangers have scored a single goal. We're creating plenty of chances. When looking at the Hamilton game, there was 15 shots on goal, 70% possession. We had plenty of the ball with 4 corners. But it's getting really hard to pick out real chances. I'm struggling to think of any real saves. There was one for Aribo that went close with the post. Kent had one. But after that, there wasn't a huge lot Ryan Fulton had to do in the Hamilton goal this afternoon. The same in midweek against St Johnstone. The keeper wasn't the busiest. Just kind of what's going wrong in the final third, do you think? Are we missing Morelos' kind of hustle and bustle that we've seen the previous couple of seasons? Are we lacking somebody who's kind of that out-and-out poacher, or is it just kind of the guys that are playing just aren't seeming to click quite right together yet?
Yeah, I think there's probably an element of all those things. Morelos, obviously before the suspension, that there'd been signs that he was sort of getting back to where he'd been before, but I did. We talked about that and what he offers to the team and his different role to pull him wide and stuff. But I thought, there was a distinct lack of people getting across the face of the goal and getting into the 6-yard box, especially during the early half of the season when at times as well goals weren't flowing. I think that's the case now. I think when Roof came on, he doesn't have any presence when he plays through the middle, and that's multiple times he's played there, and there hasn't been a good performance yet from him there. He's been so much more effective and more impressive when he's playing in one of the inside forward roles. I just don't think there's enough in that team today, not enough support from midfield. And there was a few shots from distance, but as we've spoken about that before, I don't think there's enough of that. So teams are prepared to sit in, and that they know that the shots aren't coming from deep, or that's what they're going to force Rangers into because they're not comfortable doing that, and then there's not much space to play through the middle. But I don't think Fulton was forced into many saves, but also think Kent should challenge him multiple times. There's one that was a lovely bit of play that fell to him sort of on the left side of the area, and he insists on taking the touch to cut inside, and then it looked like it was goal bound, looked like it was going in the corner, but it's a good block. But most players in that team, or most players in the Rangers side, like touches, and they're really nice with the ball at their feet, Kent, Aribo. But I think against the blocks, sometimes there's just too many touches, and it means opposition can get organised and get their bodies in the way, basically.
One of the big things in this game as well was that kind of as the game went on, for all Rangers possession, for kind of all the scene of the ball, it never really felt they were going to break Hamilton down and score. And then when Gerrard turned to his bench, the first one he made was Zungu coming off for Ryan Jack. And then later on he brought Roof on shortly afterwards and made a double change with Davis and Scott Wright coming on. Do you think he should be making the more attack-minded changes earlier? I think it's probably fair to say Zungu had an absolute howler today, and him coming off after an hour wasn't a surprise by any stretch. But should that have been supplemented by bringing Roof on at that point, or Scott Wright, or somebody like that? Because I thought Wright looked really sharp when he came off the bench. I was impressed with him. He seemed direct. He seemed happy to run at defenders. But it was...
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a weird one.
It seems to be happy just to go like for like with the changes too much for me. There's no real intent in kind of trying to change the game, change the shape or anything.
Well, what I would say today is obviously they're going for that shape, sort of where they have the two in midfield, and then Aribo's fairly far forward. So on paper, it's a pretty attacking lineup to start off with. So I don't think necessarily you should need more than that in terms of players in the positions to change it.
After an hour, do you not think you should maybe be sacrificing? I mean, if you're going to take Zungu off, fair enough, replace him with a more attack-minded player and just have one sitting deep. I think when you're 0-0 with Hamilton after an hour, you've had, at that point, probably 60-65% possession anyway. Probably even more, actually. I think kind of going for that defensive-minded change, for me, you should have brought somebody like Wright or Roof on at that time and kind of really made a go at trying to kill the game off, because what we'd been doing for the previous hour just wasn't working.
Yeah, I get that to an extent. I just think that it's the personnel, though, because there haven't been issues in that way previously when the best midfielders have been in there, and Wright, Jack and Davis from the start. Saying that, obviously Rangers haven't been scoring freely recently, but I think it's the personnel, and having Zungu and Kamara in there was just far too passive. I also think that, so yes, he could have brought Roof on earlier, but he didn't actually do anything for the 25 minutes he was on anyway. I do think Wright looked very lively, positive, keen to shift the ball quickly and make stuff happen, as you would sort of like to think on his debut. But I also sort of get that, as in, like, I don't think Rangers should have been relying on the guys just come in the door to change the game. It's slightly forced in that Morales is suspended. Defoe's not available. Neither is Arfield, who, again, another game that was perfect for Arfield in terms of bridging that gap between the midfield and the forward line. So short of options today, I think probably reluctant to put pressure on Wright as such to change things. But I mean, that's obviously what he's been signed for, and he was brought in January. So yeah, a bit earlier, I think, for him and Davis, because Kamara I thought he had a poor first half and then didn't really shift gears after that. So I think there would have been a case for just taking Jack, or putting Jack and Davis on for Zungu and Kamara at the same time, and just going for your best midfield, and then maybe leaving it a little bit, see what they can create with the players that are already on. Because Hadji drifted out of the game again, but I thought he was a bright-ish spark in the first half, because he's the guy who can. It's the one touch stuff and the movement, and that's what Rangers are going to get through with. But I mean, it's partially his fault that he fell out of the game, but also there's just not enough balls being zipped into him and no pace to work with. So I think maybe some of the same changes but made slightly earlier, but I can sort of understand the right rationale a little bit.
One other thing I want to talk to you about is Ryan Kent, because for me, again, it was another really poor performance from him. There was kind of lots of endeavour earlier on, but there was very, very little end product. And when we're looking at a guy who, I'll be honest, I've never fully been on board the Ryan Kent hype train. I've never quite seen what other people may be seeing him. I think he's good in flashes, but he's not quite what we need and probably what we should have got for what we paid for him. But it's another game where this is the sort of time where Kent should be taking games by the scruff of the neck and should be making an impact. But again, he's failed to deliver far too many times in big games for me. Is that fair, do you think? Or
I think with all this, I suppose, as well, obviously it was a poor performance, but within the context of the league, obviously, things have went fantastically from a Rangers perspective so far this season. You would say that he started very well, but the contributions haven't been there in terms of the goals and assists for quite some time. I think the one way that I always sort of look at him in terms of when everyone's saying, and the club have admitted, they're going to need to move players on in the summer and for money, he is, to my mind, the player who could lose and make a good profit on, and it'd have the least impact on the team in terms of you could get someone in, because Jared really praises his work rate. I mean, you can get people who come in and work hard, and in terms of
much less than £7 million.
Yeah, and also I think it's very difficult watching him and trying to assess how he plays, because at times he's the only player with any pace in that team today. the only player really prepared to run at teams and look to skip in and out and create stuff. But at the same time, when it comes to it at the end, there's just nothing there. And in terms of his shooting is by and large poor, and he takes too many touches before he makes decisions and the thing. So I thought he was absolutely electric and nigh on unstoppable for the first couple of months of the season, and he looked brilliant. But yeah, I agree that there hasn't been much there recently from him, and he's a player that Gerrard obviously trusts very highly, and that's because of the work rate. But I don't think you can trust the contributions to always be there. So yeah, I thought he got himself into some great positions today, and some of that was from great movement. But at the end of the day, I suppose if you don't finish it off, it doesn't count for much.
So now that's the gloomy stuff over and done with. We're still 21 points clear at the top of the table. We're still, I think there's 10 games left now. 16 points needed, I believe, to secure a title. This is just a wee speed bump, isn't it? This isn't the start of the great collapse, because, I mean, it would be the biggest collapse ever. But there's still positives that you can take for that game and move forward to Kilmarnock next weekend, yeah?
100%. Well, McGregor was brilliant. The point here is that it's a Rangers team that have, obviously the standards are very high from in general and also from what they've achieved so far this season, but it's still unbeaten. The fact is that this is another game. Yes, it's a setback, but it's another game closer to actually going the whole season unbeaten. So yeah, and it very much looked like it was going to be a game that Rangers get 3 points from, which would not have been deserved. But again, it's a situation where Rangers almost got themselves into a situation to do that, and it was, the negative is going away with a defeat, is going away with a draw, when actually McGregor had to pull off several really good saves, and it was Hamilton that created the major chances in the game. So yeah, it's a 21 points. And as we've seen from Celtic's form, there's absolutely no guarantee they're going to be winning lots of games on the bounce. So no, there's no worries in terms of the title race or anything like that. Just probably just a disappointing watch for a lot of people today, and a strange watch because it wasn't expected.
And just finally, we'll look at it in a bit more detail later in the week when we kind of preview the Kilmarnock game. But as we're recording this now, the Killies kind of on the brink of appointing Tommy Wright as their new manager. That's just a sickener, that. A Tommy Wright team on that pitch. It's just horrendous, isn't it?
I mean, Kilmarnock have been poor recently, and I saw their game at St Mirren yesterday, and they were really lacking in ideas going forward. It was very much Whitehall up front and pump it up long to him and see what comes from that. So they need a manager with clear ideas going forward. It's obviously that's going to lead to the chance of there being a bit of a managerial bounce with players looking to impress as he comes in, and because they've been horrendous recently, obviously in terms of results. So that'll give them a boost before the game, something that Rangers need to be wary of. But I mean, again, it's one of those ones where there's just more than enough quality in the Rangers team. To be fair, most of the time when Gerrard's come out raging after a game and said he needs a reaction, it's come from the players. So I expect there to be one.
You think it's quite a hand? I mean, just given what we're saying about kind of Tommy Wright's teams and plastic pitches, also the game next weekend's at Ibrox. Does it give you just that wee bit more of a boost in that we know Gerrard's probably going to have gone through his players tonight? I'd be very surprised if he hasn't. I'd very much hope to see a reaction from him next weekend. With it being Ibrox, with it being a team who's just got a new boss, and you just want to go out and just kind of go for a jugular right away, yeah?
Yeah, and I also think just the record at home being 100% so far this season, just any team that comes there, Rangers are going to fancy themselves. But yeah, there's not going to be any complacency. I think that'll be that's a given, because McGregor basically confirmed that when he came out in his post match there. He said that Gerrard's not happy, which it's hardly a surprise. But he clearly hasn't went lightly on the players because of the lead and all that. So there'll be no complacency, and Ibrox has just been just win so far this year, and clean sheets. So wouldn't be surprised to see that happen again.
So, any other takeaways from this afternoon?
I think Wright was impressive, and that's a good sign going forward. I think that's it probably for Zungu. I don't think we'll see him. That's his first start. I don't think we'll see another one. And just that Davis and Jack are the key. So that's something that, again, we've talked about replacing Morelos in terms of what he gives in his play. Davis will be there next year, but it's something that Rangers need to really work on. That's if he signs a contract. But in terms of succession plan, because you take him out of the team there and they really struggled. So it's something that Rangers need to work on in the spine of the team. Having guys that can come in and do a similar job, so there's not so much of a drop off. But it's a disappointing result, but not a disaster by any means.
Magic. Well, that is everything we've got time for this episode. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. Have a wee look back through some of our previous videos, and thanks for watching.